Welcome to Hope Channel International. If you ever wanted to know how you'll be able to tell we're in the end times, this video is for you. After watching, you'll know what you should expect before Jesus comes back.
Some people say he gives them signs in the political world, he gives them signs in the religious world, he gives them signs in the natural or sort of geographical world. And it unpacks for a few verses right here from verse 4 onward. Let me ask you a question. These things that Jesus predicts, are these things that we could be watching for now? What are some of the things that he tells us to look for?
Well, I think he's saying things that happened back in that first century as signs leading up to the destruction of the temple, but using that as a model, a symbol of what would happen in the last days as well. So one of the things is Matthew 24:5. Many will come in my name saying, I am Christ.
Right.
Well, we have sure seen a lot of that over the years. I mean, you have David Koresh and many others who've done this.
And it seems to be a rising number of them. I mean, there have always been one or two of these people in history. I was reading about one around the year 1000 a while ago, a guy in Egypt who claimed to be God. But, you know, it seems to be there's one in a century or one in a millennium. And in the last few decades, say the last 50, 60 years, there have been more than 1,000. You just here in North America, and not just kook jobs that are in a mental hospital. These are people that actually have followings. People buy what they say.
I met some people in the mall the other day during the holiday season, and if I would follow them, I'd get a ticket to Korea to meet God herself.
Oh, God herself?
God
No
herself, actually, yes.
John, what else does Jesus point out here? I mean, there's clearly false religion. We've got our fill of it. The world's sick of religion. False religion, false Christ. What are some of the other things that Jesus tells us to watch for in this prophecy?
It's interesting. He talks about natural disasters. That's one thing. I guess we could stop and sit on that for a while, couldn't we? He talks about earthquakes. He talks about famines. He talks about pestilences. What I find interesting is Jesus is talking about some phenomena that have always been around. But he says, and perhaps you're going to get to this, he says in Matthew 24 and verse 8, all of these are the beginnings of sorrows. And that word sorrows means something like birth pains. He says these are like birth pains.
Let me pause you on that. That's very important.
There were people 1,000 years ago talking about the fact that they were God, but now we've got so many of them. I was talking to an epidemiologist friend the other day about the rise in diseases. And so now we have AIDS. There's no cure yet. We hope there will be. We have the oddball diseases like Ebola and SARS and other things like this. And then the massive rise in things like heart disease. Some cancer numbers are down, thank God, but others are up. Diabetes is exploding. 26 million Americans have diabetes and 50 plus million are pre-diabetic. And then there's instances of obesity, depression, and other mental illnesses that are through the roof. So when you stop and think about some of these signs Jesus was talking about, and he was saying they will increase the closer we get to the end. My goodness, if we're not nearly there yet, I hate to see what it's going to look like when we are.
So it's not that these things haven't happened in the past, you're saying. Jesus compares them to birth pangs, to labor pains. That's what that word sorrows is literally. I think if I remember the original language, boy, I'm going to have to stretch to remember. I think it's the word odin. Or something like that.
I'll trust you on
Do
that.
not, if you have a complaint about my Greek, please address your letters to Gary Gibbs, Hope Channel. He's responsible for my Greek skills this evening. Anyway, it's birth pangs. That means these things have happened, but just like when you're having a baby, I've never had one, but I've noticed people having babies, like my wife, as those contractions get stronger and closer together, then you know you're getting closer to the big moment.
More frequent, more intense. Yeah. And that's what we're seeing happen in the world.
But listen, let me ask you guys this. I mean, people say, earthquakes, we've always had earthquakes. And how do we really know that there's more of them? Is there any evidence to suggest that those things are increasing?
You know, there's always going to be someone who will tell you, no, we've always had them, and all we have these days is better detection methods. Now, I should have this statistic, but I think the 5 largest earthquakes in history, someone will hang me up for this, but a great percentage of the largest earthquakes in history that we know of have happened in the last 50 years. And these days, with population centers being so much more dense, it doesn't take quite as much for an earthquake to wipe out a couple of 100,000 people like happened recently in Haiti. So, you know, there's going to be someone who will take some statistics and say, oh, it is. My honest conviction is that the prevalence of earthquakes today, if you look at it, and the amount of large earthquakes striking large population centers, there's a lot of them. It seems to me they're increasing.
And that's backed by science. I mean, the scientists who study this tell us, even in our recent decades and centuries, they are saying it's more frequent, a lot more of them, and stronger.
Something's going on.
Something's happening.